Super excited to be here this morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. Uh, I'm very excited to have Jessica Ekomane here. I've been a fan of Jessica's work for many years now, I realized. And I actually just realized we've spoken since, but I interviewed Jessica in 2018. I'm like, where have the years gone? um, yeah. Uh, Jessica is a French-born, Berlin-based electronic musician and sound artist, and her practice unfolds around live performances and installations. Um, Jessica has been a Max user for quite some time, and we'll get into that. Jessica, welcome to the Cycling 74 Discord office hours.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's been a moment since we last spoke, and for some reason in my mind, I thought I spoke to you like during the pandemic, but I realized like it was years before. A lot has changed since then in the world.
Exactly. No, I remember this really well, actually. I think I was really almost starting at that time in some ways. So it feels like another me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, it's been, I realize like you've done a lot of things since then, and a lot of releases, a lot of performances, and the likes. But we'll touch on more of that later. But for those who haven't been or checked out our previous interviews or discussions with Jessica, I want to touch back on so as I recall it, you moved from France, right, to Berlin, and that's where you got into sound.
mhm.
What year was that?
um, Good question. I think it was 2010 or something like that.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, maybe around 20 years old, something like this. And yeah, at the time I had never done or make electronic music or music actually myself. So I was really on the side of the observer. I was really a music nerd, but somehow it seemed also really untouchable. I thought at the time, like I had this feeling that musicians they live in another world. Also, it was kind of like so coming to Berlin made it all really real. Also, suddenly being around other sound nerds. And being in an environment that makes it possible for you to try, you
Right.
know. That's what kind of triggered it. I also started to study sound studies. I mean, at the time when I came to Berlin, it was totally random, actually. Really, I felt like I kind of, put my finger on the map and I'm like, okay, I'm going there. And it was for a student exchange, so it's not really original. It's kind of big
Ah.
stories. It was supposed to be for 6 months, and now it's been like 13 years or something like that. So yeah, so like I'm coming from something totally different. I was studying art history at the time, actually.
Right.
What I was coming to do in Berlin, I had no idea of the music culture here. Um, yeah, so that was all a big shock, and
Right.
and this is how it transformed
So
into.
you weren't aware of at that time Berlin's extensive electronic history, music history at that point.
Not really, no. I didn't know. I mean, like coming from a really small place, it's more of a village. So
Right.
actually, I chose this place just because it was the only big place where I could go. I really needed to get out of this small place where I was, like sometimes when I go back there, they turn off the light at like 8 p.m. or something like that. And
Yeah.
everything is dead afterward. I couldn't stand it anymore somehow. So I was after this rush of the big city.
Right.
Yeah.
Strangely, I can relate to this. I mean, it's not that I don't like where I grew up in Tasmania, but at the same time, I certainly had. I can't even describe it, and it wasn't like a conscious thing. But I had some kind of energy inside of me where I was like, I need to leave and go to somewhere bigger. And yeah, my story was I ended up in Japan, and that's where I got introduced to Max MSP actually. Um,
I know.
Yeah, so you can't you got to Berlin and then everything unfolded and you kind of got to like learn about the history of techno. I'm sure it's unavoidable.
I mean, I knew about electronic music, just not the city somehow. I mean, I had really
Yeah,
different association with Germany. I
yeah,
think it was more about the historical aspect of the city, etc., not really what's going on there.
right, right. And you found yourself studying sound, and I think a lot of people in here know the guy that was one of your teachers. Um, was Robert Henke, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yes. I mean, yes.
that's pretty amazing to get to work with Robert. Um, and
Yeah.
how long was that how long did you work with that course?
So actually it was 2 years at the time. It's a master. And the thing is that he just taught, I think I arrived at the like the last semester he was teaching, or the last year maybe, then it started to do something else. And at that time it was all in German. So, and my German was not so great, so I think I understood 10% of what he was saying. But that was amazing anyway.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but that was important in the sense that actually it's in one of his class where like just for a project we had to use Maxim SP. So I never learned it. And I am self-taught in a way because I didn't have the class of Maxim SP, but just like we were forced to use this, it was to interface with the Wayfield synthesis.
Mm.
So there was this framework to move sound, etc. We already called it objects to do certain movements. So we had 1 month to do this, and it just like, okay, you have this, do something. So I just put all my soul in there. I was even sleeping in the studio at the time, I think, like, to really like
Yeah,
understand how this
yeah.
is working. And somehow I understood that, I don't know, I realized I can do something with this, so it fits with my brain, which was really
Mm.
interesting. It was also a really different way of thinking about it because the system was a multi-channel system, so it was really thinking about sound. It was not only um okay, so when I grew up I learned a bit of piano, and I was always a little bit stuck because I'm not good at being an interpret. I think it's really not for me.
Mm.
And also just like I think I was frozen by all this the weight of this history, and like the I don't know. So I can't compose music. I'm not a trained composer. I can't compose music this way or like write just notes on paper. But this way of approaching music was totally different and breaking all of this. So I think it was allowed me to go over my fear, with no preconceived idea of what I should do.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I mean, without pigeonholing holing a lot of people here, I think that's one of the draws to Max is that, the landscape of working in Max is so vast, you can find the parts of it that kind of work with your personality.
Hmm.
Yeah, amazing. And so, yeah, I mean, Wayfield synthesis is incredible. I've had the pleasure of experiencing it a couple of times, and it's kind of wild to experience in person on a huge multi-channel system. Did you guys
Hmm.
was that a performance or was it a installation?
It was a recorded piece, so like the system was just sitting there and they were recorded pieces.
Right.
And I think for me it was important in the sense that it was the first time I was working with a multi-channel system, I believe, or I did a piece for multi-channel.
Right.
So also I think it was determinant in this way that space became an integral part of my way of composing.
Right.
Because now if I play live, just like solo, I would play in quadraphonic sound most of the time. And since then, also I work with a lot of different multi-channel systems. The Ecosmonium is one of them,
Mm.
of course. We'll speak about this afterward, I guess. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, I guess each of these different systems have different personality. For wave synthesis, I don't know where they are nowadays. Actually, I didn't follow because there's this thing also, this kind of techno fetishism around, I have to say, different multi-channel systems as well.
Right.
And
Right.
there's been different ones popping up at different times that are supposed to be different from each other, but yeah, it's not necessarily always easy to spot. So I don't know where they are nowadays and if they developed it. I
Right.
know at the time we had someone from the company or whatever that was building it that came and told us they had this plan of building Wayfield synthesis for cars. That would
Wow.
be
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. I mean, if you think about it, cars are almost a perfect, spot for multi-channel sound. Although I'm not sure what it might feel like to be driving and have things moving around. It might result in undesirable outcomes.
Yeah. And
um,
I'm not in this realm, but I just found it funny at the time. I remember like this to have this plan. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, unreal. And so that really lit you, like that just really got you going, right? Like, and then you were off. You were recording. You were performing. Almost directly after this educational um, moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that I think when you live in Berlin, I mean, especially at that time, it's such the community is so big and so strong, and there's so many opportunities every day to see amazing musicians. But also, this was one of the reasons why maybe I started to do it. That there was less gatekeeping to start to show what you're doing.
Mm,
Basically, it was really easy to just ask someone, and they would just check if you're like just not spamming and like serious, and you had the opportunity to just try and show it. And whether, like, I think in France, it wouldn't have been so easy, especially, for example, I don't know. I never lived in Paris, but I think in Paris, it's more like old institutional place.
mm,
Or gatekeeping, it's not everybody that can enter in those institutions, or at least it's the way it feels.
right.
So I think the openness of the place and also the openness of people, it really felt like a caring community for me at the time. Also, people really pushing me to start. And also, there were many people that were older than me. I found many women also doing electronic music, and just learning from their experience was really beneficial for me at the time. So it's a mix of a lot of different things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of turning up in a more uh, like creatively progressive city, and yeah, than Berlin, especially around that period that you arrived. In terms of a city that's comfortable with experimentation uh,
Hmm.
and technology. Uh, yeah, I struggle to think of another city that's equivalent. That's not surrounded by academia or that institutional gatekeeping. Um, there's a whole I mean Berlin's changed in even the last 15 years, but like there's definitely still a love of the underground and appreciation and yeah I mean
Yeah, no, at least I mean, even at the time when I arrived, people were telling me, Berlin changed so much in the last 15 years or something. So it's been an ongoing process of change since, I think, probably the wall came down or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean I certainly think it got inundated with people moving there from all over the world to try to you know have their musical project, um but it's still added to the progressiveness of it. I mean, if you think about it as a melting pot of people coming there to be creative, that's kind of cool as well. Like, um,
Hmm.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
still in Australia and I was hearing of all these. It was basically like people would toss a coin. They would leave Australia and move to London, uh, and work in bars because they could make twice as much money as they could in Australia when they took their pounds back to Australia, or they would go to Berlin. Um, yeah, and people were essentially flipping a coin for one or the other. Um, yeah, that's incredible. In what year was your first like official release?
I think it was multi-vocal. So which year was this? Was it 2018? I think I don't remember. Sorry, really
Right.
bad numbers. It's something that people are always surprised with because they assume like, oh, if you're working with Max, you must be good with numbers and stuff. But actually, I have this kind of number amnesia. So I even struggle to remember which year we are in sometimes. So
That's why I
yeah,
work with Max, because I'm not good with numbers.
yeah.
um, Also, remembering releases. I don't know. There's something about the moment I release it, I forget about it. It's done. It's out there in the world. Farewell. Have fun, my release. Like, kind of like uh,
Yes, exactly.
hasta
It
la
feels like
vista. Yeah. Um,
because there's always this delay also of when you release something, right? It depends, but sometimes like the this piece with Shelter Press now it took like maybe 2 years or 3 years to be released. So it
right.
was really yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you speak about that because, yeah, I feel like you spend so much time with it, and then there is that delay between finishing and releasing. And, like, I think some people stay somewhat connected with the material and they like to quote unquote tour the material. Um, yeah, I would say I'm disconnected by the time it's released. I've already like found something else to explore. I'm already pushing towards the next thing. Um, would you say that's a similar process for you, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at least in the case of multivocal, it was also it was supposed to be a little bit different. It was supposed to be a tape actually at the beginning, and then it transformed into this vinyl. And actually was not supposed to be my first LP. I have something else that still didn't come out that was supposed to be my first LP anyway.
Ah,
Um, yeah, so it was such for such a specific context that yeah, I think it is behind me for manifolds. I think it represents kind of where I am now. I still feel strongly about it. I mean, there's something special for me in the sense that I feel like I really pushed what I could do, or it's really special for me. So I still feel connected to it, even though it's a while ago. Yeah.
yeah,
Because I
that's
think also something that happened in it somehow I'm always surprised actually at what I've done in a way. Like that the complexity of it. I'm even myself rediscovering some parts when I listen to it. Yeah.
that's cool. So
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, because I think there's that. I mean, I guess with a more traditional band where you've written parts and you've written changes and bridges and choruses, and then you're very familiar with it. But like in the world of sound that we kind of live in, you end up coming back to your own material with like fresh ears after you've had a little break, and you get to kind of rediscover the sound.
Yes, exactly. And it really depends on your mood also, the way you listen to what you're doing. There's some things I can't listen to at all because it's not the right moment.
Yeah,
And then somehow there's some things that I haven't listened to in a while and I haven't done anything with it. And then I listen to it and I'm like, oh, now it makes sense. I mean, there's this also aspect that is a little bit of unconscious,
yeah,
I think, when you create
yep.
and you're going somewhere, but it's not always you don't necessarily know the intention on the moment. Sometimes you understand later when you look at all the work you've done, but it makes sense with each other. It tells a story.
Yeah, I love that. That transmission of energy through you to create the work. Yeah, and you're right. Like this is what I love most about the world that we all work in with sound is that you, the analog minute kind of melts away. Like time, we transcend time to a degree. And when you're in the studio or when you're just wherever you are making some sound, I love how it just flows sometimes. And yeah, what you describe is pretty accurate for me as well. Like I go back and I'm like, wow, I really sat on that one area of sound for a long time, or that was really short and I could have extended that longer. Um, yeah, that's cool. Tell us a little bit about your time at GRM. I'm really curious. GRM, for folks who don't know, is a place there in France that has perhaps some folks here have seen it. It's pretty infamous. Usually there's a picture of someone in front of the buchla, right? And it's kind of almost a cliche now. Um, I'm not even going to pull up photos because I feel like I'd be singling out people. But yeah, it used to be, I recall, like, yeah, I mean, GRM is infamous. I mean, the GRM plugins, their releases, their residency. From what I've never done one, but I believe it's pretty awesome. Tell us about your time there. Like,
So I first went there, I think it was during the start of the pandemic. Maybe it was 2020 when I started to go in the studio and work on this. And then there was an interruption and I started again, maybe was it 1 year after or something like that? So it was done in 2 or 3 times actually. Then I finished it the year after when I was at my place or something like this and premiered it. Yeah, I mean the place is great. Now they moved to a new place which I haven't seen yet. I'm going to go back there this fall actually, so I guess I will see it. So at the time they were in this transitional place. Um, and they have 3 different studios, I think. And yeah, if people don't know it, it's to not be confused with the EMS because many people take photos with the Buchla when they are at the EMS,
right,
so which is in Sweden. And the GRM is a bit like similar. They come all from the same time, basically, when all those different electronic music studio popped up in Europe, even though I think GRM was kind of the blueprint of this.
right,
So this is why it's relevant in this way. But the picture I have, I think they have a reproduction of the original. I forgot the name of this analog synth that they have. But there's one white one which is not the original one, but
they,
it's
they they have a surge system as well, right? I think.
I think so, but I haven't used this. I was in this room where I forgot the name now, but there is this white one, like really simple kind of big but simple type of synthesizer whose name I forgot. I'm sure you will find it if you just search for it. So anyway, unfortunately, I haven't used any of this.
Ah,
It's
yeah.
all digital. I tried at some point, but I'm always a little bit. It's difficult when you come from Max, I think, because there's so many things you can do, and also so many things you can hack. But for me, it's like it's a little bit difficult, and I already have my way of doing things in
Right.
Max MSP. Restarting with a new instrument, it's a whole thing. So anyway, yeah. It was interesting to be there. I mean, for me, I'm French, so maybe I have different approach to being in Paris or, being there or this kind of institution. It might be different if you come from outside. But still, it's always quite impressive because you have all these different posters of the concerts of, I don't know, Parmigiani or, Pierre-Henri, Pierre Schaeffer, etc.
Right.
there. And it's way smaller than what you would imagine as well. It's also a really small team.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it was really great in the sense that, as you said, it always feels so particular somehow to have this kind of institutions that are really invested in experimentations. So you don't have this pressure of doing something that is commercial, like you can do anything. And I really enjoyed since François Bonnet is directing it, it changed also the direction of the programmation because before they were working more, it was a little bit more conservative maybe. They were working more with the conservatory in the region and really more in this electroacoustic direction. And now we open it up Um,
Nice.
yeah, and the thing is that the system, when it's not up for concerts, they just store it somewhere. So if you haven't heard it before, then when you're working on a piece, you can't try your ideas on the system. You just try it on the way on the day you play.
Oh wow.
Wh- Yeah, which can be a little bit scary. I was lucky in the sense that I worked often with multi-channels systems before,
Oh
so I can
wow.
imagine in my head. But other than this, it's pretty abstract, and you have the surprise on the day of the concert. It works or it doesn't. But luckily, also you have a lot of help from the engineers there. They are really good. The quality of the speakers also is really good.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah, so the way I planned it was that they explained me that there's different ways that this is arranged, and one of them is quadraphonic. So there's many speakers, but they are all arranged by quadraphonic. Uh, I was about to say cycle, but arrangements, different
Okay.
ones. So that's what I've done. And also because actually quads is a format that I know
Mm.
already. So in my way of working with polyphony, etc., I've thought about it this way. Even though it sounds like more voices, actually in the piece there's four voices.
Right.
Go, yeah, it sounds like much more than the sum of its parts at the end. And a lot of the work is also, I mean, there's the composition, and then a lot of the work is also the adapting it to the speaker system. So the way it works is that you have this big, I mean, you can choose to just play live, and then one of the technicians will do the diffusion for you.
Mm.
So diffuse the word of the technique of being behind the desk, the mixing desk, and it's kind of important or really kind of almost archaeological way of playing electronic music. But it was really fun for me to try that historical technique. And a lot of the work is about placing the different channels that you have and kind of creating the whole story in the space.
Right.
Um, yeah, and being behind the desk really feels like playing an instrument, which is also what the idea of the system was originally. It was thought as a loudspeaker orchestra.
Right.
So really be strong reference to yeah, known structures of classical music. You know, at the time they wanted to do this. I don't know what's the how you translate it in English, but this solfeggio of sounding objects. There's this book from Schiffer about it. Yeah. So anyway, there's this strong connotation behind. Yeah. So that's kind of what I've done.
Uh, amazing. And so you composed the piece without testing on the system. That's pretty incredible. And
Yeah, that was
did
really hit or miss, I think.
yeah, did you mix it live? Like you didn't have the guy, the engineer do the diffusion for you, or
No, no, yes, I do the diffusion myself because
right,
actually a lot of, I mean, also because I come from this background of working a lot with multi-channel, I really know how much of artistic decision can hide behind this. So I really wanted to do it myself and see
right,
what is possible. And also for me, it was fun to do another way of playing. It is really playful and you can really experiment with the different faders, etc. So it's really fun also to not have a screen, you know, I just have this mixing desk, so I really enjoy
yeah,
that.
right,
Um, but I think when I say it was really hit or miss, is that I think I continued developing some technique of composition that I used before, of polyphony, etc. But I pushed it much more in the sense that the melody is really broken down
mm,
to like I pushed it to the edge almost, I feel like. And it's because you have this spatial element going on. So this is broken down in space. And unfortunately, this is what you cannot really hear if you listen to the recording.
right,
But this is quite important in explaining the form of the piece, actually,
mm,
this idea. And the way the system is made is also that there's different set of loudspeaker with different quality of sounds. So some have more bass, and some like that you
Uh-huh.
might have seen, the white one that are called the showers,
Yeah.
is mainly high frequency sound.
Cool.
Actually, I had a funny moment lately. I played in Sweden. It was this edition festival, this encounter between GRM and the EMS, and they did this festival playing different pieces. And it was also this, it was interesting to see the difference of taste, because like the way the speakers look is more French and a bit Barocco. And I think in Sweden is really, really this Swedish Scandinavian design, really minimalistic. So we didn't really like the showers. So nobody used them. Like there was this aesthetical differences that were really funny to to see. Yeah.
And so is that a recording of the concert, or that you recorded that separately when you were at GRM?
No, this is the piece itself. It's not a recording of the concert.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Because when you do a diffusion, you diffuse a piece most of the time that is already written.
Right.
So the what is happening live is the spatialization
Right.
part. Yeah. So because if I would have recorded the concerts, I mean, it would have, yeah, I don't think it would have made sense really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and possibly not mixed down to two channels in a meaningful
Yeah.
way. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, that's really cool. Folks, we're gonna play a little bit of Jessica's Manifolds, and just take a listen. We'll play a few minutes of it, and then feel free to ask any questions. So here we go. I'm also starting a little bit into the recording. I picked out
Hmm.
a favorite part of mine. Can everyone hear that?
No.
You may not hear it, Jessica. Sorry. I could just sit here and listen to this. It's so good, Jessica. Uh, I it's funny when I catch myself listening to this, and I you sent it to me, I think before you or the day you released it or earlier. I
Mhm.
immediately was my mind just starts hearing it in quadraphonic. Like I wish I could have been at that concert. Because I start
Yeah.
imagining this sound like being inundated or yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not really made to be listened on this, like streamed through Discord on your computer speakers.
Apologies too. I should mention, we're now looking at something like several levels of compression by the time it gets to folks on the other side. So please, if you have the means, definitely grab the original recording from Jessica on her Bandcamp where it's uncompressed. Um,
Well, if you live in Paris or near Paris, or if you go there, I will play it again. There's a big Présence Electronique festival in, is it October or November? I think beginning of November, which I think is the 10 years of the festivals or something like this. So there will be a really, really interesting program, and I will be there also. It's over 3 days. So book your planes or
Yeah, yeah. Get there you go, folks. Great excuse to head over to France. Um, Maybe we're getting
yes.
a few questions. Someone asked, "What is the name of the festival in Paris?" I-
Électronique, sorry,
Are
Présence
you able
Paris.
to post a link? Even is there a link up for it already? Perhaps.
I think they didn't announce the lineup yet,
Okay.
but you search for it. The next one is in November, I said, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there it is. There. I see. Um, Someone just posted the name.
Yeah, that's me, Ben
Oh,
Cooper.
there. There's a few questions here, Jessica. Greg is. I'd love to know about the sound material. Like, what is the material that you're working with there in Max? Like, what are
Mhm.
the sonics that we're
Um,
hearing? Synthesized or
but,
samples or?
mhm. There's a lot of different things, but in general, I don't work much with samples. So the first part, you can say it's a sample, but it's a sample of myself. So the original samples come from a piece that I made for, there is a podcast for MACBA, this museum in Barcelona, MACBA Radio, and Rock from Evol, if you know, have this radio show there, and they invited me to do the music for one of them. So let me find it. It's called Object Food,
Mm.
and the number 8. So I don't know if I can. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, this one. Yeah, so you will hear I worked on different things in there, but um, one of the guests was Chris Corda. She's a musician from the US, really interesting character. She founded this thing called the Church of Euthanasia. She's really about antinatalist things. I leave you
Cool.
to see what she does. And also, she's a software developer. So, more like
Ah.
free software and mostly for Windows, actually. And so, one of the software that she developed, maybe I will just post her website. So,
Yeah, that would be great.
yeah. So one of the software that she developed is this polymeter, with, as you see, it's like MIDI sequencer for music that's in multiple prime meter at once. So it's about working with polymeters.
Mm.
So I tried something with this for the show, and then somehow I reused that, which I think this is why it has this kind of unpredictable character rhythmically, because there's this polymeter behind. Yeah, it's an interesting software. It feels really like old-fashioned, but really interesting. conceptually. And I think she's using this software to do all of her music, basically. So you can have a
Uh-huh.
look. Yeah. So the first the first part is not directly from this, but I reworked. You will hear already actually in the podcast somewhere. There's the reworked version, and then I reworked this reworked version with a I think now it has like reworked it for four voices and like added more things. So this is what's happening first, and then afterward it's all sound synthesis. I often work with tuning, especially Afro-diasporic tuning. And this is tuning from Malawi that I use here. And it's from a family of tuning that you find also in blues, etc. So it kind of traveled also in the world diaspora. That is really interesting. So this is, and I've worked with this kind of, let's say, this kind of musical vocabulary for a bit.
Mm.
And this kind of way of treating polyphony, for a long time, I was really inspired by the music of the Pygmies. Sometimes they are called this way. They are really, what's typical in this their form of music is the polyphony or vocal polyphony.
Right.
Each person does a note, and then somehow the result is more than the different parts. So it's really my way of composing is really inspired by this, or my way of understanding polyphony. Uh, Once again, keep in mind I'm not a trained composer, so this is how I learned about polyphony. So you have these four different voices that somehow go through different sort of transformation, I would say. So what you hear, a lot of the effects is feedback,
Mm.
actually. Never really worked with feedback, so it was like a first try at what is possible, and it was really interesting
Yeah.
for me. So it gives this impression of being really stretched out, or like this melody that is really like decomposing, kind of, and then it morphs into this last part. That is it's another tuning actually. I think it's just intonation. It was from La Montagne or something like this, so it's a bit different. But it's also somehow more about texture, the
Right.
last part. So I'm trying to go through um, different phase of the same thing in a way, or different moods, different textures. And this is quite complex because it took me a lot of time to, it was made over 3 years, as I said. I think it was
Mm.
2 or 3 years. And I assembled different parts together. At first, I didn't know it fit together, actually, when I was telling you that some parts are really subconscious.
Mm.
And it makes sense at the end. I really didn't know until like maybe 3 days before the concert exactly what this is going to be. Um, yeah, so it's quite complex structure even for me. So this is the base of what is going on in there,
Wow.
basically. And also, yeah, maybe I can say that for me at the moment it's difficult to play it live again because the patch are quite unstable. I mean, it's an outtake of a live um, improvisation in a way with the patch,
Right.
but then it became the fixed piece at the end.
Haha.
Uh, so I wouldn't really be able to do the same thing again.
Oh, I love that
Yeah.
though. I love that there's a ephemeral quality to it.
Yes.
You could get in the ballpark, but it's each time you redo it, it's going to be a little bit different. I mean, that's part of the nature of working with feedback as well. You can't kind
Hmm.
of you can't make the same feedback happen the same every time. Maybe with a computer you could really program it, but at which point I don't think it would be interesting anymore.
Yeah, this plus mixed with the fact that there's some randomness happening for the melody, etc. And so altogether, it's hard to find exactly the same settings. Yeah.
I love that you're getting the feedback. It's something I feel like could be generally explored a lot more in computer music. Uh,
Mhm.
I came up, my career came up. I'm just wanting to play live. I would beg my friends who were in standard like metal bands and indie bands, okay, let me play. So I'd be like the one guy getting up in the middle of an indie show to play on his computer. Um, the audience often wasn't very happy, but that's okay, but the nature of hanging out with those people a lot was that I would get to see guitarists in particular how they would use feedback as a mechanism for tone. Often not even playing on the strings. Throwing the guitar into the speaker of the amplifier to make it feedback, or using dedicated actual pedals. Roland have a pedal called feedbacker, um, to leverage feedback as this tool
Mhm.
for sound. And it's something I'm personally interested in. I love that you're also exploring it. And
Mhm.
yeah, I've always found it interesting how little also or computers have made it into noise music, because it feels like it's perfect for it, like Macs and noise music.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I think there's a lot of it. There's a certain field of computer music. I mean, I'm thinking of Migo, for example, like the time of Editions Migo. There was a lot of
yes.
computer music that was going in this direction of noise. I think I opened something for myself that I need to investigate more, because I didn't know so much about feedback, and maybe my first association with it was this kind of noise music I'm talking about now, or guitar feedback. And I didn't know about the richness of what you can have happening actually. So this is why I think I really just started to open a door for myself, but there's so much more I can do. Yeah, that's yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know. It's hard. It's so unstable as well as you say. So
that's part of the
really
fun.
creating something is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, trying not to blow up the DSP and having to having to restart it so that you can get sound back. Um, it's interesting you mentioned Editions Mega. I mean, I feel like they are one of the borderline institutes or record, definitely label or group of musicians that were stemming out of Vienna there in the 2000 late 90s, 2000s, really pushing computer music. And I do recall a story of them, Peter and Farmer's Manual, going to Japan uh, to to play, and all of a sudden, like there was this wave of Japanese noise computer music there for a while, that was happening, and but it didn't seem to go past this era of the 90s 2000s.
Mm. Yeah, and it was a certain aesthetic somehow, loudness for the sake of loudness. Now I'm thinking also of something, a link that I necessarily not necessarily made before, but feedback originally comes from, I think, the blues, or the
Oh yeah,
first
for sure.
people playing electric guitar were actually Black American musicians. So it kind of relates back also to this idea that I was saying, where I'm also using this tuning that is Afro-diasporic and related to the blues. I feel like this gives another twist also to this idea of feedback. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, arguably the moment they started using electric guitars, right, the feedback became a thing. I mean, I think it was probably happening even before that with microphones, but not in an intentional way. um, uh, and I speak of them when they went to Japan. I should mention that that was that kind of like late '90s Merzbow era. And Merzbow did use a laptop exclusively for a number of years there. And I don't know this for sure, but I think they were all kind of exploring Max and Super Collider and the likes for different things. Yeah,
Mhm.
Jessica, this sounds like you've opened up a porthole of of things to explore further here, for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Folks, any more questions for Jessica? Why we have her on the line? Um, just drop them in the comments. It's really great to have Jessica here. I definitely, if you've just popped in, I noticed some people have been coming and going. If you have popped in, there's a whole slew of links in the chat that you can check out, including Jessica's music herself. There was a question, Jessica. How did you come up with the idea of multi-vocal and then manifold?
So multivocal or multivocal, it came out of a sleeping event that was happening at the time of Ars Electronica. So I was really interested, and still I'm interested in alternate state of consciousness, sleeping being one, if you will. And I was wondering, like, what kind of music can I make for people who are sleeping?
Hmm.
So this is why it has this really repetitive, slow developing type of structure. Um, and I think, as I said, what I do nowadays, this was really specific for a specific context. I think at the time I was also doing more installations. Nowadays, it's less my format of choice. I prefer the liveliness of music as a medium, or the concert as a artistic medium, actually.
Hmm.
Um, but I think this was really influential in the format also, because when you work with installations, then you are in another temporality. You are in this much more ongoing temporality, which is something I'm also interested in, into like approaching the temporality of daily life, which
Hmm.
is why, I mean, as a side note, which is why I like Max, where you can work in milliseconds as opposed to musical times. Milliseconds is the daily life time, right?
Right. Right.
And this might actually seem like a detail what I'm saying now, but it's been relevant when I had to work with acoustic musicians. And then sometimes I try to translate what I'm doing via MIDI in score. But when you work with millisecond and not musical time, then you get really complex musical writings that are actually not really possible to play for a human interpret. So it's kind of on the side, but I find this really, really interesting, actually. So in a way, this is also relevant for multivocal, because I would like to adapt this, or I try to adapt this to be played for humans, but actually the way the pulses are shifting every time is not really possible for a human to calculate this in this or to be so precise. Uh, if you don't have, yeah, some sort of signal, or it's not really, yeah, it's not really possible anyway. So yeah, I mean, this is where the idea of multivocal comes from, basically. And it was a first attempt for me, or a first way to work with, to develop all these ideas that you find again in Manifold, but much, much more developed, of polyphony inspired by the music of the pygmy among else, and the different type of tuning and different type of speed, etc. And this question of playing with temporality. So for me, that was a start. Also, I work quite conceptually in general. So
Yeah.
for example, if I do a patch, I don't build instruments. I'm gonna build a patch that does one thing. So if I do something, I'm like, okay, what do I want to say now? Or what kind of interesting behavior can I develop until the last bit, which is what I've done with multivocal, like really a really limited concept that actually is quite versatile, because if I change the speed, or if I change the sound synthesis, etc., I have other outtakes actually from this project that I didn't release that sounds totally different. Like you wouldn't necessarily recognize that this is the same patch that originated it. But in general, I don't really reuse patch, so I'm just gonna, yeah, say one thing. And I think this is something I started then, and I'm continuing as part of my practice or my approach.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, definitely there's folks who, um, for whatever reasons, like to have these patches that stem across years slash decades of development. Um, but there's also something really freeing and kind of you know independent of like starting something fresh each time. Um, yeah, sometimes I do want to delete my hard drive and just be like, not draw on the past. Um, and just
Yeah.
start afresh. There's something I think at first that the blank max page, the blank max patch is perhaps so intimidating at times, but then there's also something very, as you become more comfortable with Max, there's something very uh, exciting about it too. It's like a blank painting canvas, you know. Um,
Yeah, and it forces me to come back to the essential as well. I
mm,
mean, a lot of my max patch are not, I don't aim for complexity in terms of engineering. Let's say it's not exactly my perspective, but more complexity in terms of the sound output. Because this is definitely something I noticed both for patches or also when you play multi-channel, that the complexity of the technology doesn't necessarily lead, sorry, to a complex or interesting sound outcome. So I'm saying this for multi-channel systems, for example. If you have, I don't know, 100 speakers or 130, it doesn't really make a difference for you in terms of you can't really hear actually that 30 speakers are missing.
mm,
In terms of the patch, sometimes you can do something that looks really complex. A lot of people think like are too attached to the way things looks like, I think. And sometimes, I mean, it depends what you want to do, but for me, what's interesting is really the sound output. So sometimes I may do things that are really like not that elegant or really simple or something. Oh, I make a mistake, but then it's not a mistake at some point because I reuse it. I want this behavior. For example, there's one piece I'm playing that there's a lot of clicks in it.
mm.
And at first, it was one of the first pieces I did with Max, and that was not an intention for me, but it was there. So I didn't know how to get rid of it. I think, to be honest, at the time also, or why it was there. So I just used it to make a rhythm with this and become like a core thing for the patch. And I remember at some point at the time, a guy looked at my patch and he was like, "Oh, you could do it this way to not have the click," and then it just took the soul away from the piece. So I didn't do it.
Right.
So I'm really not that interested in engineering. Uh, I don't know. You would say this like virtuosity,
Right.
maybe, unless I need it.
Yeah.
If I need it, yes. But other than this, I'm really searching for a personal musical language or song language. And also, I'm starting from scratch and I'm searching for a behavior basically every time. And once I found something, a little bit of a behavior, then I'm going to start to build around this and see how it can develop in a piece. So in multivocal, to come back to that, this is a really bare bone example, like one behavior and how can I develop this in a piece, which was not necessarily so easy because it's really static, but then you need to have the sound synthesis being more lively and have more things happening because the process is so mechanical, right? So a
Right.
lot of the work was around there in this area.
I yeah, I really appreciate you talking about your approach here because so often a lot of electronic music, computer music even you know tends to have some influence on from the past, and you know that's fine. I think we're all in ways. It's without the only way to not be influenced would be to have never listened to anything, um, and to completely shut yourself off from the world. Um, but yeah, I love this kind of more conceptual approach to sound, uh, and this kind of conceptual rationale of development. Uh,
Mhm.
and yeah, it makes me realize I understand why you're approaching this with like a fresh patch. Um, in exploration. Do you ever go back to your old patches from years ago and take a look at them?
I'm a little bit afraid. Also, some of the first thing I've done, I think I didn't know how to properly back up things at the time, so I really need to like at some point do it actually and really search again.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, for me, it's a little bit like a patch is a little bit like a diary,
right.
like a diary. And so if I'm looking back at the first thing I've done, it's like reading your diary from when you were a teenager. Or something like this. So it's a little bit like painful,
Right, right.
but also funny. I mean, yeah, so I don't do this so often in general. As I said, like I tend to leave it behind me. I think I should do it more. Sometime maybe I'm discovering that there's some ideas I could develop more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so not really
Yeah, that's
somehow.
interesting. I have to say like yeah, I don't go back and look at old stuff so often, but I know there is stuff where I hit a wall because of my skills at the time. I wanted to develop it further. I didn't have the means. But then there's an idea there still, you know. And now I've progressed as an artist, I can potentially take that and put it somewhere where I would like to, progress it to a point that I originally intended.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe here I can add something that is particular to my background because when I started doing it, I never made electronic music. So, for example, I know that when some people start and they've already had experience with electronic instruments, then they will try to reproduce sort of behavior they already know.
Right.
So I think this was quite important for the way I'm working nowadays, that I didn't have this, I had no idea of whatever I'm doing. I was really in this full exploratory aspect of things. Um, so in a way, I never had this block where I often talk to people who have this block that they want to do something that they don't know how to. I think the way I go about things, that if I can't do it, then I don't want to, in a way. Like automatically, I'm gonna try to go towards something I can do.
Right.
Um, I don't really have, or especially at the time, I didn't have a projection of what is possible. I didn't know. I was really discovering, which was also good because then I think sometime a little bit if you're too trained, and this is for everything like that, you tend to shut yourself from other possibilities,
Yeah.
actually, or tend to take paths that are already known, or so I think this was what sometimes I wish I still have this freshness to Maxim SP, because of course over time you're always gonna lose it.
Yeah, no,
You
I totally hear you and I totally agree too. Like it's like when you start when you start your ear starts to hear about different tunings, right? It's like you can't unhear that after you've learnt it. And prior to learning kind of, scales and tunings, you just feel a lot freer. You can do everything. You can do whatever you want. I mean, Western music suffers from it so much now, of being locked into this 12th tet, you know, chromatic uh, scaling. Um, it's almost consuming itself. Um, and yeah, Max is just this great environment, like you said. You're working with milliseconds. You're working with hertz. Um, you don't need, in fact, building quantizers and scale stuff into Max. Yeah, hopefully we never make that easier, right? Because then
Mhm.
you end
Yeah,
up then you just end up being locked into the same old tunes everyone else is using. Yay.
great. So I wanted to react to something that you were talking about, knowing, not knowing, because I think it's quite important with what I'm doing, because I'm really interested to go to break this division between body and mind. So, for example, I don't like to do something that sometimes it happens. People are really fixated on the concept. It
Mm.
doesn't really translate sensually, so to say, or in terms of the emotion you're gonna get when you hear the piece. And for me, it's important. This is why I'm really interested by rhythms, because I'm interested in other way of knowing more intuitively. For example, rhythms is mathematic, right?
Mm.
So you can have a really complex rhythm or complex mathematical stuff going on, and most people are actually sensitive to rhythm, or they understand it with their body automatically. Many people will start to move, etc. And so I like, for me, this is something I try to do every time, or even for what I explained for manifolds. I feel like we need to be a certain power in what I'm doing so that you don't need this information. But once you have it, you might listen to something in another way. So there's always many, many layers of uncovering. But first is always the bodily knowledge that primes in what I'm doing. And this is why I said that I'm not so interested by technical virtuosity in that sense, because it doesn't always correlate with the complexity of your experience in terms of what you are perceiving. And this has been really my experience. Um, because sometimes with really just like free oscillators, you can have something really complex happening in terms of frequencies, for
Right.
example, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah. So, and for me, this is the task of the artist somehow, even with really limited material, that you can make something out of those free oscillators, for example, you know, or like something, not a lot. Um, yeah. And I wanted to answer to some people because they were asking if I use some framework. So I don't, not for now. It's not a rule, but maybe later.
Mm.
And yeah, and also for this, the thought of the human interpreter. Um, yeah, actually, I've done this a few times. Like lately, I've done a project with the Caribbean, so bells, church bells, you know, instruments. And the piece I tried to write for the Caribbeanist was actually an outtake from multivocal. But so it was written in Max MSP and then translating it in a score, and then also adjusting to the vocabulary or the technique of the instrument, which is something I've also done for, I wrote a piece for bagpipe. So I've tried the same with bagpipe as well. And I also like this idea of mixing, because those are really traditional old instruments as well. So mixing this with the way of writing that comes from generative music, or, you know, like whatever, like some SP. But this is something I'm trying to search for at the moment. I mean, in this, in the piece for the bagpipe ensemble, the electronic actually comes on top to open the capacity of the ensemble, because so to allow more frequencies somehow than what they can do to be
Aha.
played. So kind of extending the ensemble in an
Right.
electronic way, trying to stay organic. Um, yeah. So that was just like a side comment I wanted to say about this idea, but I'm still developing it, you know.
Amazing. Jessica, I really love how obviously this never stops and is ongoing, but you really have a sense. I appreciate your approach to making your sound works. How you approach Max is also, I think, definitively you. And yeah, I mean, I just can't wait to hear more stuff. um, I also thought it was funny. I saw that Manifolds got reviewed on Bandcamp, and their last comment was like, "Don't wait so long for more music." I thought that was not usually reviewers don't say that at the end, but yeah.
Yeah. I know. I mean, besides the fact that I can be a little bit of a slow person. I mean, I'm not like I don't know, John Zorn type of person, like 30, 30 release a year. But also, I think one of the reasons why it's like this is because of the pandemic, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know if you followed this story, but I've been told that because of it was Ariana Grande and someone else, like this one person from the mainstream decided to do many vinyls, and they
Oh,
blocked they blocked the way for everybody
yeah.
for some time.
I think Adele did it, and
Yeah.
Adele and Taylor Swift suddenly decided they wanted to do vinyl. I think
Yeah.
because they realized they have such a they have such a dedicated fan base that all of a sudden selling $30, $40 vinyl records is very lucrative when you can sell 500,000. Um,
Yeah.
and
And also affect burns as well, I think.
they totally clogged up all of the vinyl pressing plants in the world. Um,
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, this is one of the reasons why it has taken so much time. Also, in the case of Shelter Press, for example, they have a really big schedule, so it also always takes time when they
right.
schedule something that goes out. But I've been quite productive. Did big pieces during the pandemic actually that should have been released, but it's like staying in my storage for now. A few things are gonna come out, different ones.
Okay.
But this is one of the reasons, yeah.
So we can look forward to more Jessica Ekomane in the nearish future. No pressure.
I hope so, but I will try to do better. But yeah, it's been a frustration for me as well, I think, and for many people.
Yeah.
But this is a real situation, as you said. Also, just the fact that there's always a delay. It depends how you release something.
Right.
There's always a delay between scheduling and releasing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And everyone does it differently. I know I see friends and I have friends who will release an insane amount of music in a very short period of time, and I often I think yeah, it's just a personal thing how certain people work faster, slower, some people are less iterative. Um, some people are able to record something and release it the next day. Um, yeah, I think it's a personality thing a little bit too. Yeah, I often some of these friends who release a lot of stuff, I'm like, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. I don't.
yeah. Well,
I'm very slow myself.
yes, I like to take my time. But for people, for example, who are interested by this project with older instruments, there's one piece I've done for computer-controlled organ. So there's some organs that you can control via MIDI, and I used Max for this as
Mm.
well. And this should be released at some point this year. There's also a piece from Mark Fell in it.
Oh,
I don't know if he
cool.
used Max for this or not, but it might be interesting to know. I don't know when, but it should be soon now. This is also something that is there since like 3 years or something like that.
Yeah,
Uh, but I like talking about this because I think this is the an expected part of what you can also do with Max MSP, like where you don't expect this kind of technology to be involved. But this is really exciting for me to use sometimes like algorithmic ways of composing with those older instruments.
yeah,
And I mean,
yeah. It is particularly interesting because I think the original designer of those instruments often was pre computers, before computers, and before the level of technology that we all have sitting around in our rooms now. Uh, and so it was never considered that this instrument may be manipulated or controlled by Macs or a computer or some kind of advanced software.
yeah,
Um,
even though it's a surprise from time to time. I mean, I realized I'd never touched an organ before that, and I realized it's just a giant synthesizer,
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like a big additive synth. Yeah, essentially. Uh, I have a friend who did this is a crazy story. He for his masters in Melbourne at RMIT, he did a Max MSP piece that controlled the main organ, the largest organ in Melbourne, and he had been experimenting with it, but he threw too much MIDI at it, and because those things are very mechanical, they have vacuums and generators to create the air to push through the very large valves. He actually locked up the like the it stopped working. He locked it up, and they had to get a special organ guy in to like to fix it because he was throwing too many MIDI messages at it and stuff. Yeah,
So he crushed the organ.
he
The organ.
crashed. He crashed the organ. Um, yeah, kind of wild. Um, yeah, those things are incredible, especially the big, church-like organs that you find in holes and stuff. I did play one time, and it had a seat, and it literally had a seat belt. Like you would put a seat belt on, because when you would hit the lowest note, the entire building would start physically moving. It was an experience. It's like,
Uh,
yeah, you
where
had
was
it.
this?
That was in Brisbane. That was at the old Brisbane Museum in Australia. There was a moment, it was kind of amazing. There was a moment where you could hire it out for really cheap and like record in there. This was in the mid 2000s. It was kind of really special. I'm pretty sure now it's not possible, but yeah, there was a moment where the Brisbane City still owned it. They didn't. It was nothing was happening with it. You could hire it out for like $100 a day or something and record as much as you like. And this organ was incredible. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, the organ, and also because I've worked with the Carillon, those are instruments that are really their architecture somehow. And so because I'm
Oh
really
yeah,
interested by space, so space and the instruments are one.
yeah. Often they're
Um,
built into the building as it's and it's becoming less common now. Like it was very much a thing in the 20th century, when we would spend many years building these places, right? And budgets for this were different. Like I'm not sure how many modern day churches or any kind of buildings really are considering like, okay, now we need a $200,000 budget to build the organ into the building. Like, I think it was very, unfortunately, it was this different period of the world when that was a thing that you did. Yeah. Space and instruments are one. Yeah, that's very much the case. Um, well, folks, I've got one or two more questions myself for Jessica. Jessica, are you reading any books right now? If so, what are they? What's on your reading list?
so there's different things. I mean, there's one book that I would like to highlight. Let
Yeah,
me
let's see it.
uh, that is this one, Switch On, that just came out this
Switched on.
year.
Okay.
Yes, so it's about the dawn of electronic sound by Latin American women. So
Ooh.
electronic music in Latin America, really interesting. Yeah, I think it's one of the first project from this publishing house, but this was long overdue, so it's really good.
Wow.
And there's another book that I didn't get yet, but I want to get, which is similar type of story, but in India. In India, I think it was in the 60s or something like this, they also had this electronic music studio. And Paul Purgas from Empty Set just did this book, published this book on the topic. I think it's called Subcontinental Synthesis or something like that.
Mm.
Um, yeah, maybe, I don't know
I
if
got
you
a
can.
link for Switched on.
Subcontinental Synthesis. Let's see.
Wow.
United Press. Yeah, I can.
This is great.
Yes. Yeah. So this is something I can. recommend
Yeah.
at the moment. And beside of this, I mean, I'm doing some research over this year and the next, but it would be about ancient mathematics and actually the let's say, non-European roots of algorithms, mathematics, etc. Because I mean, this is common knowledge for many researchers, but sometimes not necessarily for other people. That algorithm comes from Al-Khwarizmi, which is this mathematicians that was at the time it was from Afghanistan, I think, something like
Okay.
this. So he also invented algebra, stuff like this. All of this come from this area. And the first algorithms, I think, were found made by the Babylonians or something like that. And there's also a lot of different works about or research about different ways of thinking about mathematics, which is not always, for example, you can have a computer without, when you think of a computer, we think of a digital computer like a Mac or if you have a
Mm.
PC or something like this, but a computer is many things. You can have a computer without any of this kind of technology involved. And you can have different type of mathematical thinkings that are not the one that led to the mainstream idea of mathematics we have now. It's a little bit vague what I'm saying, but it's a really big research project that I'm doing. Yeah. So there's a lot to uncover there. So
Yeah. Wow, Jessica, these I'm glad I asked. These are excellent recommendations. I'm always curious about, especially like switched on, for example, because I have spent a little bit of time in Latin America, doing a few projects, and definitely very clear that there's this history there, but with the dominance of Western culture, and like it's really hard to find where it came from and what happened. You get the sense that it's there, but it's not so well documented on the web. So it's cool to see these projects are happening. Um, I cannot wait to get these books and
yeah, and maybe as a comment to what you said, of course, I mean, I think in this book on in India, they highlight also some of the Western influence. Also, it happened at the time of the Cold War, etc. So there's a political aspect to it.
yeah.
But also, you can think about it the other way around, because I think since a long time we're at a point where there's no culture happening in a vacuum, right? So, for example, a lot of the avant-garde was influenced by idea coming from India. Even John Cage, his idea of silence
Mm,
it was initiated to it by an
right.
Indian woman whose name I forgot now. I need to search for it again, but if you search for it, you will find that initiated him to this idea of the concept of silence, etc. So yeah, it goes both way. And this is what for mathematics is the same. Like, I mean, now I was citing these mathematicians from Afghanistan, but before this, there were a lot of discoveries made in India. And also, there was a lot of afterward Western contribution. So it's more of a cooperation,
Yeah.
collaboration,
A little bit
which is what,
symbiotic.
yes, this collaborative aspect is more interesting for me than like some kind of dominance or, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I do know there's some fascinating stuff happening in India now. Like there's a whole like underground hardware, experimental hardware developers, and software too. It's exciting. I'm always curious about it because it's always like, it's not. It's yeah. It's explorative. And yeah. Nice. They're great recommendations. Well, Jessica, this has been incredible. I could probably talk to you for the rest of the day, I'm sure. It's been great. And I love hearing more about your work. Very excited for these next releases coming up. Uh,
Yes.
and thank you for the book recommendations. This has been great. Um,
Sorry to interrupt you because I just saw one question I haven't
oh
answered. It's
yeah, let's answer it.
have you ever considered building behavior in something like JavaScript? Or do you typically find it better to build logic and functionality in the box in Max? Um, So I don't know JavaScript, or I don't really know any type of programming language. For me, text is a little bit complicated, although I've been starting since I got more into algorithmic stuff. I realized that also actually Max, if you just use the pre-made object, there's some limitation, which is where I'm going back to, do you use other extension? Well, this is where there's, how is it called? Bar, Max, bar, cage,
Yep.
etc. A little bit more things going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see how sometime in terms of things you want to do, it might be more economical to use text. It's also another way of doing, and also I like sometimes this the limitations of the clunkiness of finding out how to do it. So maybe later I will do it. I'm not totally there yet, but I'm coming there.
I love that
That's it.
you're open to it. You know, so many folks will the pure mention to another Max user of using some JavaScript or text based language, they are like they just shut it down immediately. But I love that you can see this possibility for revisiting the clunkiness and discovery of possibilities. And yeah, you're right. Like whilst Max feels very open ended, there's still many of these Max objects. There's still some kind of decisions that have needed to be made by someone in order for it to function a certain way. And you know, like creatively, we may want to go drill down deeper in terms of how we want. It's why a lot of people end up going over to use something like Gen, because
Mm.
they can essentially build an MSP object within Gen to a degree. Uh, but yeah, JavaScript also is a great way of extending functionality of Max. Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's say that I mean, it takes time to learn new language or new things, and I
Yes.
like to do all these things myself because, as I said, I realize how much of artistic decisions can be hidden in there. And I also have a limited amount of time. There's many things I need to learn beyond just JavaScript. Like, for example, just working on this project, learning about the carillon, making a score, knowing that I'm not really trained in making scores and things like this. Every time you need to juggle between those different skills. And I think for JavaScript and things like this, yeah, you need some time before you start to be a little bit autonomous, maybe. So
Yeah.
this is also why you need to really concretely find these moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Jessica. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. This has been excellent. It's been so great to see you and catch up with you again. We'll definitely have to have you back around in the future. Um, yeah, folks.
Yeah.
Jessica is you can find her online. She has an Instagram. Uh, it's just your name, right? Uh,
Yes.
yeah. Jessica Ekomane on Instagram. Her Bandcamp links are a little further up, uh, but I do have her page here. I'll post it one more time for you all. Yeah, Jessica's great to follow. Um, thank you, Jessica. We'll see you again sometime.
I hope so. Thank you so
Yes,
much. It was cozy to hang out with you. I'm sending it. Yeah.
yeah. There's Jessica's Instagram, folks. Awesome, Jessica. Farewell. Talk soon. Stay in touch.
Bye.
Bye.